Welcome to another deep dive. We're going to be exploring how to write those novels that just fly off the shelves, bestsellers.
Sounds fun.
It is. And we've got a great source to guide us today, Techniques of the Selling Writer.
Oh, yeah, Dwight V. Swain.
You know him.
Heard of him. He's like a writing coach, right?
Yeah, and an accomplished author, wrote over 1,000,000 words himself. Fiction, nonfiction, the whole gamut. So, not just some guy with theories.
Right, he's been in the trenches.
Exactly. So our mission today is to dig into his book and see what gems we can unearth for crafting a novel that not only captivates readers, but, hits that bestseller list.
I'm ready to dig. Where do we start?
Well, Swain starts with something so basic, it's almost easy to miss.
Oh, let's hear it.
He calls it the motivation reaction unit.
Motivation reaction.
Yeah, sounds a bit jargony, but it's actually super intuitive. Think about those books where a character does something and you're just like, wait, why?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like they pull a 180 out of nowhere.
Exactly. Swain would say that's where a lot of stories go wrong. They miss this key unit.
Okay, so break it down for me. What's this unit all about?
Basically, it's cause and effect, but for characters. Every action, every choice needs to be grounded in a believable emotional response to something that's happening.
So it's not just about what happens in the plot, but how those events make the character feel.
You got it. And those feelings, that's what drives the story forward.
It's all about those inner workings.
Exactly. Swain uses this great example. Imagine you see a kidnapped boy, face streaked with tears.
Heartbreaking.
Right. But think about it. That image, it's not just a detail, it's a motivator.
So whoever sees him, yeah.
Exactly. And here's the key. Swain says the character's reaction happens in a specific order.
Okay, I'm curious. What's the order?
First, they feel.
Makes sense.
Then they act or speak based on that feeling.
So it's not just like, boom, action. There's this emotional process happening first.
Right. It's what makes characters feel real, not just robots going through the motions.
Yeah, you see that robotic thing a lot in bad writing.
Totally. Now think about your favorite book. Can you spot any of these motivation reaction units?
Now that you mention it.
I bet you can. They're everywhere once you start looking. And guess what? Swain says a whole series of these units link together well.
That's how you build a scene.
You're catching on quick. And not just any scene, he calls it a unit of conflict.
Conflict. Essential, right? Keep things interesting.
100%. Creates tension, raises the stakes, makes you want to know what happens next.
Like in any good thriller, you got to have those twists and turns.
Oh, absolutely. And Swain even breaks down the scene structure into 3 parts. He calls it goal, conflict, disaster.
That's a good way to think about it.
It is. So let's say our hero wants to, rescue a princess. That's the goal.
Massive goal.
Right. But then there's a dragon guarding her. That's the conflict.
Oh, no.
And then, during the fight, the hero's sword breaks. Disaster.
Ooh, that ups the stakes. So what happens next?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. Swain has this whole other concept for what comes after the scene. He calls it the sequel.
A sequel. Wait, I thought we were talking about scenes.
We are, but stick with me.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. A sequel? Wait, I thought we were talking about scenes.
We are, but stick with me on this. Swain uses sequel in a different way. It's not like a whole separate book. It's more like,
Like an aftermath.
Yeah, exactly. It's the space where the character reacts to that disaster.
Oh, okay. So they're dealing with the fallout from that broken sword.
Precisely. It's where we see them process what just happened. And more importantly, it's where they figure out their next move.
So it's like a transition, right? Setting up the next scene.
You got it. It's all about cause and effect, remember? Swain breaks the sequel down into 3 parts too. Reaction, dilemma, decision.
Okay, I'm starting to see the pattern here.
Right, everything's connected. So our hero, he's just lost his sword, right? His reaction might be despair, panic. Then comes the dilemma. Does he run? Try to fight the dragon barehanded?
Tough choices. What does he do?
Well, that's the decision. Maybe he spots a hidden escape route or remembers a weakness the dragon has. That decision then launches us into the next scene.
Makes sense. So it's like, boom, disaster. Then a pause to regroup.
Yeah, and Swain's big on what he calls compression in these sequels. You don't need to go into every detail of what the character's doing.
So keep it focused.
Exactly. It's more about their emotional state. What are they thinking, feeling as they make that crucial decision?
That makes sense. You want the reader in their head.
Exactly. And these sequels, they're not just about pacing, they make the story more believable, too.
Oh, how so?
Well, they give the character time to react, to make decisions that make sense, given what they've just been through.
Right, so it's not just jumping from action to action without any thought.
Exactly. Swain really emphasizes giving your characters time to breathe, to think, to make choices that flow naturally from the events of the story.
It's all about creating those believable motivations.
100%. Now let's zoom out a bit. We've got these scenes, these sequels, but how do we string them together to form, a whole story?
Ah, the big picture.
Right. That's where pacing and structure come in.
Yeah, those are key. You can have great scenes, but if they're not arranged well...
The whole thing falls apart.
Right, like a movie with all these cool scenes, but they're in the wrong order.
Makes you wonder, what were they thinking?
Exactly. So, how do we get it right?
Well, Swain has some really insightful tips. One of them is about controlling the pace. He says you can speed things up or slow things down by adjusting the length of your scenes and sequels.
Interesting. So if you want a fast-paced thriller...
You'd keep those sequels short and snappy.
Yeah.
Just enough time for the character to react, make a decision, and then boom, right back into the action.
Got it. But if you want to create more of a slow burn to really draw the reader into the character's inner world,
then you give those sequels more space. Let the characters' emotions, their doubts, their internal struggles play out.
Yeah. So it's like you're playing with time, stretching it out, compressing it, all to create a certain effect.
Exactly. And that's just one piece of the puzzle. Swain also talks about the importance of scene placement. The order in which you present those scenes, it can make or break the story.
I can see how that would matter. What's his advice there?
He suggests arranging your scenes in ascending order of intensity, building towards a satisfying climax.
Like a crescendo.
Exactly. Think about it. If the most exciting, the most dramatic scene happens too early,
Everything that comes after might feel...
anticlimactic. Like, well, it's all downhill from here. You want to keep the reader hooked, make them feel like the stakes are getting higher with every scene.
Right, and that leads to a powerful payoff at the end.
Exactly. So the middle part of your story, that's where you lay the groundwork.
Yeah.
You're building tension, foreshadowing events, maybe introducing subplots.
All those threads weaving together.
Exactly. But those subplots, they need to serve the main story. They can't just be distractions.
Right. It's got to all be connected. So we've got this rising action building towards the climax. But then what? What about the ending?
Endings. Oh, man, those are tricky.
They can be. You want to tie things up but not make it too predictable.
Right. It's a delicate balance.
So what does Swain say about crafting a strong finish?
Well, first off, he reminds us that the ending is just as important as the beginning.
It's the last impression you make on the reader.
Exactly. He says it should offer some kind of revelation, a deeper understanding of the protagonist, or maybe the theme of the story.
A sense of completion, but maybe not in the way you expect.
Right. And Swain says there's no one right way to end a story. You can have a classic resolution where all the loose ends are tied up neatly, or you can go for a more open-ended conclusion where some questions are left unanswered, making the reader think.
Oh, I like those open endings. Makes you keep pondering the story even after you finish the book.
Me too. But no matter what type of ending you choose, Swain emphasizes a few key elements. First, the climax should be the most intense, the most exciting part of the story, the culmination of all that build-up and tension.
It's the moment everything explodes.
Exactly. And then the conflict, the central conflict that's been driving the story, it needs to be resolved in a way that feels both believable and emotionally resonant.
So no deus ex machina.
Yeah.
No easy way out.
Nope. The reader needs to feel like the protagonist earned their victory or suffered their defeat. It has to ring true to the story that you've told.
Authenticity is key.
Right. And finally, Swain says, the ending should leave the reader with a sense of closure, even if there are some lingering questions. You want them to feel like they've completed a journey, even if the destination wasn't quite what they expected.
Like in life, right? Sometimes the journey matters more than the destination.
Yeah, profound stuff. But ultimately, Swain's all about giving writers the tools to craft their own unique stories. He emphasizes finding your own voice, your own style, and letting that shine through.
So it's not just following a formula. It's about understanding the principles of storytelling and then applying them in a way that feels personal and authentic.
Exactly. And that brings us to what I think is the most essential element of any story.
The characters.
You got it. Because without compelling characters, even the most perfectly structured plot will fall flat.
Absolutely. Characters are the heart and soul of any good story. They're the ones we connect with, the ones we root for, the ones we cry over.
And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore Swain's insights on how to bring those characters to life, how to make them jump off the page and into the reader's heart. All right, so we've covered plot, we've talked about structure, all those building blocks of a good story.
The framework.
Yeah, the framework. But now let's talk about the heart of it all, the characters. Because you can have the most amazing plot in the world, but if your characters fall flat,
It's not going to work.
exactly. The reader needs someone to root for, to connect with, to...
To care about.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we create characters that feel real, that jump off the page?
Well, that's where Swain really shines. He gives us these amazing insights into character development. And it all starts with understanding that characters are more than just, names on a page. They're
People.
Yes. They need to have their own motivations, their own desires, their own flaws.
Flaws.
Yeah. Nobody's perfect. And trying to create a perfect character, well,
It's boring.
exactly. It's those imperfections, those quirks, that make characters relatable.
So embrace the messiness of human nature.
Exactly. Now, Swain talks about this concept of the focal character, the one who drives the story, who the reader is most invested in. And he says that focal character can't just be passive. They have to be active. They have to make choices, even when those choices are tough.
So no wallflowers allowed.
Right. They have to be driving the story forward. And those choices, those actions, they need to stem from a place of authenticity, from their unique personality, their backstory, their desires, their fears.
All connected.
Exactly. And Swain talks about using both internal and external stimuli to keep that focal character moving. Think of it like this. A character might have this burning desire to, say, write a novel.
Okay, that's their internal motivation.
Right. But then maybe they have a demanding job or family responsibilities, or they're struggling with self-doubt.
Those are the external pressures.
Exactly. And that tension, that conflict between what they want and what they're facing, that's what creates the drama.
And keeps the reader turning the pages.
Exactly. And as the character grapples with these challenges, they should grow, they should evolve. That's what makes the character arc so satisfying. It's like,
a transformation.
yes. And remember, flaws are essential. Don't be afraid to give your characters weaknesses, insecurities, even some bad habits.
Those make them human.
Right. And those flaws can be the source of some of the most interesting conflicts in your story. Maybe your character is incredibly brave, but also reckless. Or maybe they're brilliant, but also arrogant. Those flaws can lead to mistakes, to bad decisions, to conflict, and ultimately to growth.
There are opportunities for learning.
Exactly. And then there's voice. Every character should have a unique way of speaking, a particular rhythm, cadence.
So it's not just what they say, but how they say it.
Right. Their dialogue should reflect their background, their personality, their emotional state.
It's got to feel authentic.
And that goes for their actions, their thoughts, their relationships. All of it contributes to creating a rich, believable character.
Someone we can connect with on a deeper level.
Exactly. Swain also reminds us that characters don't exist in a vacuum. They interact with other characters, and those relationships should be dynamic, believable.
And those other characters, they need to have their own motivations, their own goals, which might align with or clash with those of our focal character.
Creating that web of relationships, that's what makes the story world feel so real. And speaking of conflict, we can't forget about antagonists.
The ones who create obstacles for our hero.
Exactly. And here's the thing, they don't have to be evil villains twirling their mustaches.
Oh, I love those villains.
Me too. But sometimes the most compelling antagonists are, well, more complex. Maybe they're well-intentioned, but their goals conflict with those of the protagonist.
Or maybe they're representing a force of nature or a societal pressure.
Exactly. And the best antagonists, the ones that really elevate a story, they're often relatable in some way. We might not agree with their actions, but
we can understand where they're coming from.
Exactly. Give them a backstory. Give them a reason for being the way they are.
Make them feel like real people.
And sometimes, the most compelling antagonists are the ones who have a point. Even if we ultimately side with the protagonist, it's those shades of gray, those moral ambiguities that make stories so fascinating.
Because in real life, things aren't always black and white.
Right. And one final tip from Swain. Show, don't tell. Don't just tell the reader your character is brave or intelligent or kind.
Show them.
Exactly. Let the reader draw their own conclusions about the character based on what they see and hear. Trust your reader to put the pieces together.
And that's really what it's all about, isn't it? Creating a story that engages the reader, that makes them think, that stays with them long after they've finished the book.
Absolutely. And I think Swain's techniques of the selling writer gives us this incredible toolkit to do just that.
It's not a formula. It's more like,
Right.
yeah, a guide to help us understand the principles of storytelling and then to apply them in our own unique way.
To find our own voice, tell our own stories.
And that's what makes writing so exciting, right? It's this process of discovery, of exploration.
And it's never too late to learn and grow as a writer.
Exactly. So to everyone listening out there, keep writing, keep exploring, and most importantly,
Have fun.
and that's a wrap for our deep dive into techniques of the selling writer. Hope you enjoyed it.